The sound of the real estate agent's high heels clicking against my hardwood floor was loud, but it was the arrogance in my daughter's voice that echoed through the empty hallway. I stood quietly in the kitchen doorway, holding my morning cup of coffee, watching my 34-year-old daughter, Lauren, guide an unfamiliar couple through my living room. She pointed at the floor-to-ceiling bay windows, ran her hand along the custom oak mantel my late husband had carved with his own hands, and smiled with complete confidence. "The location is unbeatable," Lauren told the prospective buyers, never once looking in my direction. "My mother is finally ready to downsize into an assisted living facility. We can close the sale by the end of next month, fully cleared." The buyers nodded, looking around the house as if I were simply a piece of old furniture that came with the listing. Lauren had already scheduled an open house without telling me. She had called an estate agent, listed my 4-bedroom home on the market, and arranged for moving brochures to be mailed to my address. She assumed that at 72 years of age, a quiet widow with arthritis wouldn't have the energy to fight back. She thought my silence over the past few years meant I was ready to be packed away into a small room while she pocketed the equity. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice or create an embarrassing scene in front of the strangers standing in my living room. Instead, I took a calm sip of my coffee, walked over to my desk, and unlocked the small steel safe in my study. Inside sat a navy blue leather binder containing the original land grant, the property deed, and a private family trust drawn up 40 years ago by the best property attorney in the state. Lauren believed this house was an easy inheritance waiting to be cashed out. What she forgot was that 30 years ago, her father and I made sure no one could touch this home without our explicit, unanimous signature. By the time the sun set that evening, Lauren was about to discover that the house she tried to sell was completely out of her reach, forever. To understand how my own daughter could walk through my front door with a stranger and try to sell the roof over my head, you have to understand the history of this property. My husband Thomas and I bought this land in 1984. Back then, it was just 5 acres of overgrown pine trees and an old dirt road on the edge of the county. Thomas was a carpenter, and I worked 35 years as a registered nurse at the county hospital. We poured every weekend, every bonus, and every ounce of physical labor into building this house board by board. Thomas built the foundation with his own hands. I planted the birch trees along the driveway that now tower 60 feet into the sky. Every corner of this home held the memory of our life together. When Lauren was born, we dedicated everything to giving her a secure future. We paid for private schooling, covered her college tuition in full, and even helped her buy her first townhouse when she started her career in marketing. When Thomas was diagnosed with terminal illness 8 years ago, his primary concern was ensuring that I would never be vulnerable. Thomas knew that grief and aging can make people targets, even for their own children. Before he passed, Thomas sat down with our family attorney, Robert Vance, and established the Miller Family Heritage Trust. The deed to the entire property was placed inside that irrevocable trust. Under the terms of the trust, the property could never be listed, mortgaged, transferred, or sold as long as I was alive, unless I voluntarily signed a formal deed of transfer before a probate judge. Furthermore, the trust held a strict forfeiture clause. Any intended beneficiary who attempted to force a sale or partition against the primary trustee's consent would be instantly disqualified from receiving any portion of the estate. Lauren knew a trust existed. But over the years, as the neighborhood developed and property values skyrocketed into the seven-figure range, greed clouded her memory. She began to see the home not as her childhood sanctuary, but as a quick $800,000 payout. Over the past 2 years, Lauren's visits became less about checking on my health and more about dropping subtle hints. "Mom, this yard is getting far too big for you to manage," she would say during Sunday dinners, looking out at my garden. "You shouldn't be dealing with stairs at your age. A nice retirement apartment in the city would be so much more practical." I always gave her the same gentle answer. "Lauren, I love my home. My memories of your father are here. I have wonderful neighbors, and I manage just fine." She never liked that answer. To Lauren, my independence was simply an obstacle to her financial plans. Her husband, Greg, had recently suffered major setbacks in his private consultancy firm. They were living far beyond their means, driving leased luxury SUVs, and facing mounting debts. They needed cash, and they needed it quickly. Instead of cutting back on their lifestyle, Lauren decided that selling my house was the easiest solution to fix their mistakes. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday morning. I heard car doors slamming in the driveway. When I looked out the kitchen window, I saw Lauren, an estate agent, holding a clipboard, and a couple in business attire walking up my porch steps. Lauren didn't knock. She used the emergency spare key from the garage lockbox to let them inside. "Mom, we're just doing a quick walkthrough," Lauren announced casually as she walked in, completely disregarding my shock. "The market is at an all-time high right now. If we list today, we can get top dollar before winter sets in." I looked at the estate agent, a young woman named Sarah, who had a look of slight embarrassment on her face. "Lauren," I said calmly, "I never agreed to put this house on the market." Lauren waved her hand dismissively, stepping between me and the buyers. "Mom, we talked about this. You're 72. It's time to be realistic. You can't take care of this place. And Greg and I don't have the time to keep driving out here to check on you. We already put down a holding deposit for a suite at the Greenbrier Senior Residence." The couple began walking through the hallway, whispering to each other about remodeling the kitchen and tearing down the back porch Thomas had built. Lauren looked at me with a cold, impatient expression. "Just let them look, Mom. We're signing the listing agreement this afternoon anyway. It's what's best for the family." That was the moment any remaining doubt disappeared from my mind. She wasn't trying to protect me. She wasn't worried about my health. She was treating me like a tenant she could evict to cash in on 40 years of my labor. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply nodded, stepped back into the kitchen, and let them finish their walk. As soon as they walked out to the driveway, I picked up my phone and called Robert Vance. "Robert," I said when he answered, "my daughter just brought a realtor and buyers into my home. She is attempting to list the property." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Eleanor," Robert said, his voice deep and grave, "do you want me to activate Section 4 of the Heritage Trust?" "Yes," I replied softly. "Prepare the paperwork immediately." 2 hours later, I arrived at Robert Vance's law office in town. Robert had the full file spread out across his desk, the original 1992 deed, the certified trust agreement, and the updated land registry filings. "Eleanor, legally, Lauren has zero authority to even speak to an agent about this land," Robert explained, pointing to the highlighted clauses. "The house is legally owned by the trust, and you are the sole managing trustee with absolute veto power. but under Section 4, because she attempted to initiate an unauthorized sale and claim title, she has triggered the forfeiture provision. What does that mean for her, Robert? I asked. It means her future remainder interest in the entire property is legally void, Robert stated clearly. Upon your passing, instead of passing to Lauren, the house and surrounding land will automatically transfer to the County Historical Preservation Society, with an endowment set up to maintain it as a public nature park in Thomas's name. I picked up the pen and looked at the documents. 40 years of hard work, 40 years of quiet devotion to a child who now saw me as an inconvenience to be cleared away. I signed the formal notice of breach and the revised trust distribution without hesitation. Robert, I said, handing back the folder, please send a formal cease and desist letter to the estate agency and send a certified copy of the forfeiture notice directly to Lauren's home. The following evening, the front door of my home flew open with a bang. Lauren stormed into the living room, holding the certified envelope from Robert Vance's office in her trembling hand. Her face was flushed red with absolute fury. "What is the meaning of this?" she screamed, throwing the papers onto the coffee table. "You had your lawyer send a cease and desist to my agent? You threatened to sue her firm? Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" I sat in my armchair, knitting a blanket for my neighbor's new baby, completely undisturbed by her shouting. "Lauren," I said quietly, without looking up from my needles, "you brought strangers into my private home without my consent. You attempted to sell property you do not own." "I am your only daughter," she shouted, pacing across the room. "That house is my inheritance. Greg and I needed that capital to secure our business line. You're an old woman sitting on $800,000 in an empty house while your own family struggles." I stopped knitting, set the needles down in my lap, and looked up into her eyes. "This house was built with your father's sweat and my labor," I said, my voice steady, firm, and unyielding. "It was never yours to sell. It was never a bank account for your bad financial decisions." "I'll take you to court," Lauren spat, pointing a finger at me. "I'll hire a lawyer and prove you're not competent to manage your affairs. I'll break that trust." "You should read page 3 of that document, Lauren," I said gently. Lauren stopped, glaring at me. She snatched the papers from the table, flipping aggressively to the 3rd page. As her eyes scanned the legal paragraphs, the forfeiture clause, the irrevocable revocation of her beneficiary rights, and the transfer of the estate to the Conservation Foundation, her hands began to shake uncontrollably. You wrote me out?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "You gave the land away to a park foundation? You made your choice the moment you decided to treat your mother like an obstacle," I replied, standing up slowly from my chair. "You assume that because I am quiet and aging, I am helpless. You forgot who built the floor you are standing on." She stood frozen in the center of the room, the realization crashing down on her. The $800,000 payout she had banked on to rescue her lifestyle was completely gone. "Mom, please," Lauren stammered, tears forming in her eyes. "We have debts. The bank is going to call Greg's loan. You have to help us." "You came here yesterday to put me in a home against my will," I said softly, walking over to the front door and opening it wide. "I will not fund someone who seeks to destroy my dignity. Please leave my house, Lauren. Hand over the emergency key you took from the garage." Lauren looked at me for a long moment, realizing there was no anger to argue against, only absolute, unshakable resolve. She reached into her purse, placed the bronze key on the entryway table, and walked out into the cool evening air. The heavy oak door closed behind her, and the house fell into deep, peaceful silence once again. It has been nearly a year since that evening. Lauren and Greg had to sell their leased vehicles and downsize into a modest suburban rental. Greg had to close his consultancy firm and take a salary position at a logistics firm to pay down their credit balances. Lauren sent me a handwritten letter 6 months ago. She apologized for her arrogance, for letting financial desperation blind her to what truly mattered, and for treating our family history with such disrespect. I wrote back to her. I told her that I forgive her as a mother, but the boundary remains firm. Trust, once broken by greed, takes years of quiet humility to rebuild. Every morning, I sit by my living room window with my coffee, watching the sunlight filter through the tall birch trees Thomas and I planted 40 years ago. Never let anyone make you feel small or powerless simply because you choose to live quietly, and never allow anyone to trade your dignity for their convenience, no matter who they are. If this story reminded you of the power of holding your ground and protecting your peace, please subscribe to the Quiet Files. Share your thoughts in the comments below and stay one step ahead of those who mistake quiet grace for weakness. Until next time, keep your head high and protect what you spent a lifetime building.